Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I review books. I do the occasional singular book reviews, book tags, book hauls, everything bookish I do it here. And if you're a fan of lengthy essay length reviews, written reviews, I write for a Substack called A Couple of Dorks Substack, so I'll put the link below, but I'll also put the name up here so you can check that out if you like Substack, or if you like reading written reviews. So although the sun is out, rain is like drizzling a bit, where I maybe kind of like the rainy season of the year at the moment, and for the past, let's say, 3 days, the rain has been consecutively falling, like every day before it stops. It like falls maybe from like 6 a.m. in the morning till 11 or till 1 p.m. It just falls in like spurts, and it has been falling almost throughout today, so it's like about 3 p.m. now. And I thought to quickly do this because it's Friday and I turned 22 on Monday, so I'm going home to see my family and to spend the day with them. And I thought to quickly film something, since I know I've not posted in maybe going to 2 weeks now by the time I will have posted this video. So I just thought to film something so I have something to edit and post while I'm away. I'm only going home for, let's say, 4 days or so. But yeah, let's get into the video. This is my May wrap up, and I know this is already the beginning of July. I'm always like slowest with these things, and I have 2 videos like already planned in my head but not filmed yet, so I'll get to those eventually, which are my June wrap up and my mid-year freakout tag. But yeah, let's get into the video. My May wrap up, I read 5 books in May, and I'll start with the first one I read. It was an arc I got like a year ago, but I could not finish it before my arc expired, but I somehow got my hand on another e-copy this year, and the name is Monarch by Emily John Tobias. This released last year. It's a collection that we can say in its entirety kind of looks at the human experience, humans in pain, human suffering. I would say that mostly there's some joy, but the like toughness of human experience and how people everywhere go through different things wherever they are is more hammered on with the collection. The first story is probably the best story. I cannot remember the name of heart, but I'll put the name up here. It starts with Read Something. It's a story that looks at a woman who is in this toxic relationship with an older man who we can say she ran off with him when she was, let's say, a bit younger, and she has been with him for a while, and we just get the recount of how their relationship has been so far, the ups and downs, and we learned that she has had a miscarriage, and it kind of ends off on her finally deciding to set herself free. And it's a really short story, but it's, I would say, one of the strongest stories in the collection, because I would say things pretty much go downhill from the first story, if I'm being honest. The subsequent stories kind of take on this formulaic voice, this formulaic narrative, like it's the same style kind of sprinkled throughout, and it's kind of the same, it's sort of the same topics, people suffering in one way or the other, and the issue is not the suffering, the issue is rather with how they are written. There's little punch to Tobias's writing, and I would say her writing works better when it's like all the stories, we can say they are kind of basic stories, but they just work better when she's not doing all the quirky like narrative things that she does, or very specific writer things. You can tell it's very specific to her. It's kind of like a writer finding a certain writing device and holding on to the writing device and using it over and over and over and over again, and it does get frustrating because it's kind of like the only trick in the toolbox, and the writing device, it's not like it's the best one in the first place. I would say I really did not like this collection. I liked very few stories in it. One of my favorite stories was another very simple story. It looks at a child who is coming to the realization by her parents telling her that her grandmother, who she's very close to, is about to die. So she is sent up to go meet the grandmother to talk to her before she passes on, and it's her recounting on very little events that solidify the grandmother as this very dear companion to her, even though she's so young. It's the contrast between the older person and the very young person, and it was such a simple story, but the way it's like grief handled, it's done so well. There's not too much like moving in the background, and I really enjoyed it. And there's very few stories I can say I enjoyed. Like, it's not up to a handful, and I think there are about, let's say, 8, 9 or 10 stories in this collection, so it's not something I would recommend. And I felt sad to not have liked it. But next book I finished in May was a reread, and it's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I don't know if you can see this, the sun is really out on this end, but yeah, The Handmaid's Tale, I've mentioned on this channel how this is one of my favorite books of all time. I can say this is the book that changed my life back in 2022, because I was having the worst year, and it kind of turned things around when I finished it and like realized, oh, I want to write on literature, I want to write literature, I want to write on life. And yeah, I made a small website and wrote a 1,000 word review, which I put on the website and shared on Twitter, and Atwood saw it and retweeted it, and 100 people each, over 150 people read it, and it just kind of like solidified something for me that I could do something like that with myself. And I've not looked back, and it has been the bane of my existence ever since, and I have loved it. I still love it to this day. But this book, it's a dystopian story. It's set in like a dystopian America where the country has been taken over by this authoritarian leaders. The government has been invaded and has been displaced, so the whole country has been taken over, and women in the country, they are subjected to less than, I would say, secondary roles. The women, younger women, are the center of the novel. Is that the young women who are still able to reproduce are given to these wealthy men called commanders, and they are given to them as handmaidens, taken from the biblical story of Rachel and Leah, where Jacob cannot give birth with, I think it's Rachel, and Rachel gives him her handmaiden to bear the child on her behalf, and so the child is Rachel's, but born by the handmaiden. So that's where the concept of the book is taken from. And so they are given unto the commanders, because it seems in the time this book is set in, the universe is set in, there's kind of like a declining birth rate. So it's kind of the government's attempt, the new government, the authoritarian government, is the attempt to pump up the birth rates by using this biblical scripture as their, I would say, should I say, it's kind of a national, I don't want to say national anthem, but it's kind of the anchor behind why they are doing what they are doing, right? So the story is narrated by one of these handmaids. She's called Fred because her commander's name is Fred, and so all the handmaidens, they are given names like if the commander's name is Glenn, it's of Glenn, or because it's of Glenn, belonging to Glenn. So that's the concept behind how they are named. So Fred, or I don't know if to say Fred, I always say Fred in my head, that's how I pronounce it the 2 times I've read this book. And so Alfred, he's kind of narrating to us how the situation is like in the present, but the narration, it's kind of a present story, but it's also a like past story, because Alfred tells us the inner workings of the government, the present workings of the government. She also gives us an insight into what her life was like before this present government came and overthrew the former government. She tells us like it unfolds slowly, it bounces between present and past. So we are seeing the workings of today, the systems, she's exposing the systems to us, but then we go back in time sometimes to see what her life was like, how she was a mother, she had a daughter, she was married to a man called Luke, and it's how they did not know how all of a sudden they were in this position. We get the lead up understanding how they got to where they were, but it's how it was kind of like shocking for them. I'm sorry the sun is so out at this side. I'll try to work on it, but yeah, it's really a very heavy story. I think at the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the book, there's an introduction where Atwood kind of talks a little about the book. I think it was written in February 2017, so that's maybe like 20 or 37 years after the book was released, and she kind of addresses 3 points where people always asked, is this a religious novel? Sorry, is this an anti-religious novel? Because it's really sets up something like Christianity in a way to be condemned. I'm a very strong Christian. I have always said that on this channel. But as Atwood said, it's not really a book about anti-Christianity or anti-religion. And she's also asked, is this a feminist novel? And she said, sorry, she's also asked, is this an anti-feminist novel? And she also says that she does not think it's an anti-feminist novel, because in this book, while it's really a system where women are debased, we also see that women are used also as tools to debase the younger women who are now made the handmaidens, because the hierarchy is that the commanders have their wives who are the ones not able to produce, but then they are like they are not at the commander's level, but they are like the kind of second in command. They are in charge of the handmaidens, and then they are like the older women who at the beginning of this book, we learn that when the system is changing, these women are sent to this place where they are given to aunts. They are called aunts, to discipline them, to like reframe and restructure their minds, to work it to be fit and to be understanding of like the present situation and how they are to now behave. So it's really a book that looks at how like people are just tools. The older women are tools to sanction the younger women, but it's also like seeing how it's kind of what you can imagine how the world was like then, because we get a lot of allusions to how the aunt saying the world was too free, people were too free, women would wear what they wanted to wear. So it's that kind of disciplinarian thoughts they have, and how they are very happy to be in the positions they are in at the moment. I think really what the book looks at, I said it the first time I read it, what I saw rather than what it's always said to be about. I saw that this is a book that looks at how Christianity can be used and is sometimes used to do grave evil against people. It's like parts of the Bible are taken and they are used and twisted to fit narratives, because it's what the leader of the government, the new government, does in this book. And it's not what happens in the Bible, but it's what they use as their ideology. Yes, that's the word. That's their ideology, to commit the grave evil they commit, to sentence all these women, because it's basically them getting abused over and over again in terms of reproducing children. And it's said that it's not really that they are forced to do it, but then if you are fit to produce and you choose not to produce, you are sent to somewhere called the colonies. It's like people are rotting there, they are belly fed there, it's where sick people are kept. So it's like it's rather better to choose the choice of operating as a handmaiden than going to the colonies. So it's really it's like 300 pages, and I read it again. It's like so much more was clearer to me. The systems that infiltrating governments use, or even like infiltrators, authoritarians use to like kind of operate by this, the tools they use, and the tools are always like some of the people are always going to be part of the tools. It's the slow seclusion of information from the citizens. It's the taking away little rights. It's not done immediately, it's done like in bits and in bits and in bits, and before you know it, like you add all the many bits that have been taken away, and you turn back and you see that so much has been stripped away from you. It's really such a crazy novel. I love it with so much inside of me, because it's kind of like a story inside a story. Everett constantly tells us that everything she's telling us is a reconstruction, so it's kind of like she's trying to tell it from memory. It's a crazy book. It had an ending that when I read it the first time, instantly shot it to that like one of my best books of all time. I love what Atwood does with the novel. Yes, we are seeing some evidences of it even in the government today, in the US government, in some governments also. It's really a ride. I highly recommend it if you have not read it. The prose is masterful, like the writing here, too many parts. You can see I have quite a number of tabs on my edition. I don't know if you can see it from this point, but I have the number of tabs from my first read. Yes, a number of tabs from my first read. I have highlights upon highlights. Maybe I would link the review I wrote then. And yes, I would say I write a bit better now, but I really took that review writing it so hard because it just did something to me. The third book I finished in May was an African book called Weep Not Child by the writer. Is a famous Kenyan writer, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. He recently just passed away from health issues. I have this in the African Writer Series edition, which is said to have been an edition that was edited by and compiled by Chinua Achebe. So yes, I read Weep Not Child. This is my first Kenyan work I have read, and I did not know of this author, and he passed like few days after I had finished this novel. So, and about the book, Weep Not Child is a story that really looks at the after effects of colonialism. Once again, the British are at the scene of the crime. So it's set in, I think, Kenya in the, I think, late 40s, early 50s, if I'm not mistaken, where it seems World War II is over and Kenyans return back to find that their Kenya has been occupied by white men, although the white men did come during the First World War, and it seems like Kenyans were enlisted to go fight in the Second World War by some of these white men as well, which they always mention as the big war in the novel. And it's how they return and their lands are taken from them by the white men and occupied by the white men, and they are now like workers, serve as slaves in their own country, in their own land. And the story follows a young boy named Ngũgĩ. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but I think that's how you say his name. His name is Ngũgĩ, and he eventually gets the opportunity to go to school for the first time. His parents struggle to send him off to school while other brothers are sent to work. And it's how Ngũgĩ is pursuing education because it is served to him as like this thing that is going to change his life, is going to set his people free. Because we learned that his father's ancestors, they once owned a certain land, a very massive land, but the land is now owned by a white man, which his father works under. His father works under the white man, but the father says to the children that his ancestors really once owned this land, but then the white man who settled on the land came during, I think, the First World War, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he married there and he had children there. He married a white woman and he had children there, so he has white children. So it's really, there's this mix in this part of Kenya. It's set in Kipanga, Kenya. The third book I finished in April. The third book I finished in May was Weep Not Child by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but I have it in this African Writer Series, which was edited by Chinua Achebe, but this is by the author. He recently passed. It's a very renowned Kenyan author, and I finished this just days before he passed, and I was really moved by it because it's a look at like the effects of colonialism on Kenya. I think it's set around the 1950s, the early 1950s. I wish I put forth notes to talk about this particular book because it's not like I've forgotten what it's about. It's just hard to articulate, but I'll try my best. We follow a young boy called Ngũgĩ. At the beginning, his parents tell him that they are going to be able, his mother calls him and tells him they are going to be able to send him to school, but he's not going to be able to have like the best things, like the best clothes like other kids are having, because it's like a lot of money and they have very little. They are very, very poor. So she tells him he's going to be sent to school, and it's how to Ngũgĩ, education is like sold to him as this beacon of light, this hope, this thing to liberate his family from their present conditions. Because while yes, we follow him like trying to get education, trying to like climb up the educational ladder, the book is also set in a time where there are these like uprisings that occur because the people of Kenya, or the people of this town, of this side of Kenya, Kipanga and some surrounding parts, they they come to a point where they see that the white people have been oppressing them for a long time, and it's trying to stand up to the white people and like displace them off their lands. And we learned that the white people, the British who come here, I think they come during the First World War, right? And they settle during the First World War. I think they kind of enlist the Kenyans to fight for them during the Second World War as well, against Hitler, and they address it as the big war in here. But then the Kenyans come back, the ones who come back, they come back to see that the white people, they have built, settled on the land, and it's kind of like they become slaves to the whites in their own lands. They are unable to like stand up to the whites. They work for the whites. They get little to nothing from the whites as their wage. And Ngũgĩ, we learned that his father, the white man he currently works for, Mr. Hollands, came here during one of the war, and the father tells us that the ancestors, his ancestors, used to own the land that he now farms on. He now works for the white man on. It used to belong to his ancestors. So it's really how Ngũgĩ is treading on this path where he is seeking education, and he believes that he's the one who is going to save his family. He believes in God a lot. We get mentions of God in the book. So what we go through is Ngũgĩ seeking education, but also we get to a point where the Kenyans decide to rise up against the whites. They want to overthrow the whites to secure their lands back for themselves. They want to get better funding. They want to get more money for themselves because they are getting too little for the slave type work they are doing. They are really being used as slaves, and they cannot say a lot of things. The book is set around, I would say it's a notable Kenyan like clash that happened between this freedom fighting group called the Mau Mau, MAU, maybe I'll put it here. And it was them opposing kind of the white people, but they also like killed black people who, it was said, like it seemed that they had they were given money by the white people, or they possessed power at the level of the white people to enslave the Kenyans. So it's kind of like, we know notably in Africa, there have been, even here in Nigeria, some of the people who were sold as slaves to the British were sold by Nigerians themselves, Nigerian traditional rulers. So there's that kind of, it's really not a slavery issue, but it's kind of like, it's in a way, I am blanking because I did not do, like, it's not like I did not do my homework, I just did not take notes, which I usually do for these reviews. So, but I would highly recommend this because it just again looks at colonialism, what it does to a place, what it does to a country, how they so oppress a country that a boy who begins the book with so many hopes and dreams, so many dreams of what education could do for him and do for his family, by the end it is like squashed completely. Like the light goes out. That is what it comes to. The light goes out because the white push back when the Kenyans try to fight for their rights. They use the wealthy black men to suppress them and to push back against the black. And it's kind of the Kenyans of Kipanga living in oppression. And it's just a very sad story, to be honest. But yes, I really enjoyed this. And if you are looking to get to more African literature, if you have not heard of this one, I will highly recommend it. Weep Not Child, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. So yeah. Next book I finished was a poetry collection, and I'll be very brief on this one because it's not one I would say I enjoyed. It was a very dense one. The name is Blood on the Fork, and it's by Tongo, Eisen-Martin. I learned of him when I saw the winners of the, I think, Wyndham Campbell Prize. It's a prize where some writers, some poets, some, I would say people who do drama, who write drama or as well, they are awarded like a couple £100,000, £100 and something thousand pounds for their achievement in their field. And Sigrid Nunez, my favorite writer, was one of the selected 8 this year, so as this poet Tongo Eisen-Martin. And this collection, Blood on the Fork, it's a collection that I would say, like I said, it's dense, but then you kind of get a sense of what it's about from like the taking all the poems together and taking recurring words. We see words here like revolution. We see words here like imperialism repeated over and over again. It's a collection that I think in its totality is about like the black man existing in white America and what it's like to be the black man existing in white America. The writer Eisen-Martin is from California, San Francisco to be particular, and so a lot of the poems are set like with the backdrop of San Francisco, and it's really, like I said, it's the black experience, but also like the black being a black man in San Francisco, but also black people in San Francisco, but as a larger conversation for black people in America. Like it's a lot of poems that look at like a hope for a revolution, a hope for a turnaround with the way things are, with who the ruling powers in America are. I would not say it's one I totally loved because it was so hard to absorb, but I would say anybody should give it a shot because it's like you might get it more than I do. But then the overarching themes, I would say I wish it was not so dense with the metaphors used in here. Like they are just so far out that they make the experience difficult, and they make like the absorbing process very intense. But then he has been hailed as a very significant voice for racial topics such as this, so maybe I give it about 3 stars. And the last book I finished in May was Erasure by Percival Everett. This is the writer who just won the Pulitzer Prize for the very, very acclaimed novel from last year called James, which is said to be a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, right? But this book, Erasure, I've mentioned on this channel I think once or twice. I watched the film. It inspired American fiction because it was nominated for the Oscars last year, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, I decided to finally read it this year, but I read it with a friend of mine. At its core, it's a book that looks at a man and the current state of his life because so much is happening in his family. But then within the book, we have this segment where he contemplates like the desires of white people or white publishing for black writers, because we get to a point where there's this black book which is blowing up and which is doing so well. We can say doing well equivalent to how books do well on Book Talk, right? And it's a book that it's like written with this, we have the like black broken English in it. It's a depiction of suffering in the way that white people like to read about, and it's like that is the food that white publishing likes. But our narrator, Thelonious, his nickname is Monk. He likes to write more heady things. He likes to write retellings of Greek myth. He likes to write what it feels like black people cannot write. That at a point he gets a note from a feedback from a publishing company that he's a very good writer. Like the story submitted or the book he submitted was very well written, but like essentially where is the story about the black experience in it, because he's a black person. So that's kind of the requirement for him or for black people most of the time, and it's how he cannot fathom that this is what people seek. What he does not sell as well as other authors who do the black thing and do like the black thing to the core, because he does not want to box himself in that situation. So what he does this experiment where he tries to write a book similar to the one that is blowing up, and it's a very interesting novel because we actually get that novel within this novel. And I'll say it's one of the interesting things about Erasure, because Everett does take like he goes for it. He fully goes for it. He puts a book within a book. He writes a capital black book where we have a man from the hood, a black man from the hood who is rough, rugged, does all the worst terrible things you can think of, all the things that it is stereotyped that black people are like to do. He puts it in this book with the language so broken and the writing like mirroring the language. He gets a book deal for this book that is kind of a parody of like what he hates, and he has not gotten book deals for the books that he loves to write for a long time, and he just goes crazy because all the while so much is happening in his family life, and it's just how he's reckoning with what is happening in his family life. His sister works at an abortion clinic, and she's recently killed, and then his mother has dementia, and so she's slowly losing herself. And it's just how we get him existing with all the tumult of like dealing with his family issues, but also like the issue of being a writer who is not respected for what he loves to write because he's not writing black stories. It takes a while to get into the book completely, because it took a while for me, since it was not what I was expecting it to be, heavy on the examination of the white publishing black writer thing, but the family thing in the surrounding, since I had not read the source material and I'd only seen the film, it kind of took a while for me to settle into. But I highly recommend it. I give it 4 stars. I have to close now because a church is just starting at the back, and so the noise is getting more and more. I'm so sorry for the noise if you have been hearing it, but like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one, and I'll be 22 by the next time I'm recording. So yeah, bye.